Oh, look at me. I'm doing top-down shots now. What's next? Skydiving? Who knows? This is something I just kind of thought of doing this morning just out of the blue. Like, I literally woke up and just thought, oh, game control riggings. Let's go. I think it's a pretty good idea for me to rank these controllers right now as they are. You know, because as I get older, I do want to, start collecting more controllers, accessories, games, all that kind of junk. And I do think that it'll be cool to look back on kind of like my thoughts on all these controllers, like, I don't know, a couple years after this. That's like, once I have the money to just collect all the junk in the world. But for now, we're gonna rank my current assortment of controllers. So these are basically controllers just for the Nintendo consoles, like, Wii U, Switch, and I do have stuff like the Xbox One controller here and the Meta Quest 2 controllers. Oh god, I said Meta, not Oculus. And we'll start off with right off here. You guys are getting an automatic F tier. Just bad. I stated before in a video about Joy-Cons on how these controllers just have the worst build quality imaginable. So these Joy-Cons are made by Binbach. And I got these at a time where I was just fed up with just owning just original Joy-Cons, because these Joy-Cons have insane drift, especially the blue one. Like, it would be to the point at times where, like, when playing games like Fortnite and Smash Brothers, it would be hard for me to, make certain moves because the Joy-Con would be constantly going up or this way, and I would try to make a move like, I don't know, but it just wouldn't let me do it. That led me to scour YouTube for just the best, third-party Switch Joy-Cons, because let me say this right now, while things like the third-party Pro controllers for the Switch are, a lot more prevalent, like I have like 2 of them. No, I have 3 of them actually, 1, 2, 3, While these are more prevalent, it's a little harder to find like good Switch Joy-Cons that aren't made by Nintendo. Sure, there are stuff by Hori that I haven't seen break as badly as this, but yeah, it's not as easy to find good, Joy-Cons for the Switch 2 that aren't made by Nintendo. So I eventually stumbled across the Binbach Joy-Cons. That's what these are right here. And when I immediately saw the thumbsticks, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a beefy controller right here. I'm like, yeah, this is proper right here. Like, holding this controller right here, it just kind of feels like something like the Xbox One controller right here was just kind of, split in half. And, I would just left these 2 pieces to play with. So I got this controller, right? And for the first like 6 months to a year, it was alright. It was fine. It feels like it's molded to your hand, pretty well. Again, it's modeled after stuff like the Xbox controller and the, Pro controllers right here. It's modeled after your hand pretty well. It's just that you can feel that this thing was made of a significantly lesser quality than something like the OEM Joy-Cons or the 8-bit controller right here. And honestly, I was fine with that as like a 12-year-old or like a 13-year-old, I, wasn't paying too much attention to that. I was just kind of using this controller and just enjoying having, much bigger thumbsticks to just use, and didn't have a chance to drift, because I really just didn't want to deal with drift at this time, because, like I said, drift was just pretty bad in these Joy-Cons. So it was all fine and good. Nothing too special, nothing too, amazing. Until I dropped these controllers once. Now, let me say, out of all these controllers here, this is the controller that I've dropped the least amount of times. And yet it has the most damage. So I believe the R and L buttons coming off were both caused by the same, drop. I think it was when I was playing like at the kitchen table or something, and they fell on the floor. And I think they were like at the height of like my chest or something. So it wasn't even that, big of a fall. So I didn't expect these, the L and R buttons to literally come out, but they did. And that was kind of like my first, sign of like, oh, what? What's going on with these? I still continue to use them. It's just that I had to, whenever I had to press L and R, I just had to put my finger in there and press like the actual like, R and L like, button, not the actual like plastic piece. So it was still working okay, just to a lesser quality, like I said, because these things came off. But that changed again when I dropped them just one more time, right? Like I said, I probably dropped something like this controller and this controller, way more than something like this, you know? So I dropped them one more time, and the ZR button caved in. Like if I press ZL, you can hear it, you know, pressing down. But ZR, nothing but plastic squeaking. Literally nothing but plastic squeaking. And that's when I began to just kind of want these controllers to just go away. Because at this point, I started to care a lot more about just quality and just how things felt in my hand. And then I later found out that these Joy-Cons aren't necessarily just bin box Joy-Cons, you know? You can find lots of controllers that look just like this on Amazon, and they aren't made by bin box. So that was my first sign of, you know, the quality it's just kind of tiny switch up Joy-Cons. So these are the bin box Joy-Cons, aka the Nixie Joy-Cons, aka the Mexico Joy-Cons, aka the Moment Joy-Cons, aka the wired joypad for the Nintendo. So putting these on the Switch, they feel okay. Like they definitely don't feel, you know, like they should be on there, but they feel okay. It does feel a bit, you know, weird. They do have stuff like, you know, the LED lights on here just kind of look, oh, cool and stuff. But it just doesn't feel, you know, like you can feel, it just doesn't feel good in my hands anymore. Like you can hear the plastic squeaking and all that stuff. You can hear it just doesn't feel like, you know, it was made to work on a Switch. And keep in mind, I couldn't press ZR down anymore. I could press R and L, which kind of replaces ZR in some games, you know, but I just couldn't press ZR down. Everything else about the controller just works okay. The D-pad, it's just mediocre to me. But yeah, it's still there. The buttons, they feel okay. They feel okay. This is probably the worst feeling controller in this entire, you know, list right here. So yeah, just terrible quality. I believe I said in my Joy-Con video that these controllers rumble sounds like bugs just rattling in this thing, which if you've heard something like this with the cheap controllers, I think you do get what I mean. Oh yeah, one more thing about these things too. Why is it that they have separate just Type-C connectors right here so you can charge them? Why would I ever want to just charge an individual Joy-Con like this instead of just putting it, you know, on the Switch to charge? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So to summarize, automatic F tier, terrible quality, just terrible quality. I just don't like these things. They're just, I hate them. I'm gonna throw them right here. Oh wait, I forgot this stupid thing. Moving on. That should lead me to talk about the Joy-Cons that made me want to get them in the first place. So these are my cousin's Joy-Cons, and these just have insane drift. Like, I'm gonna say straight up, these have the worst drift I've seen just in like ever. Like out of all the videos I've seen, like on YouTube and stuff, these just have just really bad drift. I'm gonna demonstrate it because my cousin says, oh, there's no way that it could drift that bad. Which, I'm gonna prove her wrong right now. Oh look, I gotta revive them too. I gotta revive these controllers from the dead, because I haven't charged them in years. So what I did in my Joy-Con video was I went to the bottom of the news just kind of section of the UI, and I just flinged up on these controllers and I just let it go, you know? So I'm gonna do it with no cuts. I'm gonna fling up on the left stick of the Joy-Con, right? I'm not gonna touch the right stick. I'm gonna fling up on the left stick and just watch it go across this thing, all right? I'm gonna do it. Did you see that? The right stick really isn't that bad. Like, you can still use it, you know? Like, if the left stick was just kind of as bad as the right stick, I wouldn't have wanted to get those abomination, you know, bin box Joy-Cons. But it was really just the left stick that just made me want to, you know, get the bin box. Besides that, they are still Joy-Cons, you know? They still have, you know, NFC, HD rumble, that still works all well. It's just that the Joy-Con drift, you know? Which is, you know, the main thing that these are known for, you know, having issues with. It's just really egregious on these things. So I'll give them about like a D tier. And D tier things, they won't get flinged across the bed. They'll just get put to the bottom you know, just D tier. So yeah, these will go in D tier. And then might as well talk about my main current Joy-Cons right now, which are, let me see, where are you? Right here. These have been pretty good to me. And that's only because I've just kind of babied them. Like, that's the thing with Joy-Cons, is that you just gotta take care of them, you know? If you take care of them, they won't end up like these, and you won't have to resort to buying abominational controllers like the bin box, you know? So, I would say, yeah, if you just take care of them, you can have your controllers just work fine. These are literally just standard Joy-Cons, you know? These don't really have any drift or anything. They are literally just standard Joy-Cons, you know? I'll still give them like an A tier, you know? They are just Joy-Cons. They don't really have any drift or any issues like that, but I have only had them for about a year, so that's not really fair to something like these, you know, because my cousins have had these since like 2019. But Joy-Cons, they're like the few Nintendo controllers that you actually gotta like, you know, baby and take care of, because you can't just rough it around with something like, I don't know, the Wii U gamepad or like the Wii remote to the GameCube controller. You can't just rough them around like those things. You gotta like actually take care of them, because if you don't take care of them, you're gonna have, you know, egregious drift like this, and then you're gonna have to resort to buying abominations like the bin box Joy-Cons. These will go in A tier, they're pretty good. But I will say, I do wish that I could mix and match the, you know, blue and green colors, because like I said, the drift on the blue is pretty bad. Because I would see videos back in like 2018 of YouTubers who had like a lot of Joy-Con variations up to that point, and they would basically just mix and match their favorite colors together just to, you know, make it look like how they wanted it to look. Like, I think this combo looks pretty good, you know, the blue and green. I think, you know, it contrasts pretty well with the black, in my opinion, you know. If blue and green are your thing, this isn't gonna look like, you know, how you want it. Maybe you want the pink and the red to contrast, I don't know. But in my opinion, this looks pretty good in my opinion. I wish I could use this, which I know you can, you know, swap the, what's it called? The casing for the actual like Joy-Con, but I don't think I'm skilled enough to do that, you know? So I don't want to mess with that. I just wish that I could use these as they are, you know, blue and green. But that's not to say that I hate, you know, using the pink and green. I think it looks pretty good. After all, I did get it, you know, but I'm just saying, I do wish that I could just have more variations. If you want to hear my thoughts on just Joy-Cons as a whole, I mean, I think Joy-Cons in and of themselves are really impressive. Like, they managed to fit stuff from like almost every controller here, you know, like stuff from like every, you know, Nintendo controller just ever made, you know, including like, I don't know, the IR sensor into this controller, which is pretty impressive, yeah. Just kind of little things with them, like, you know, the triggers are digital. That's a little drawback for me. I think I wish Nintendo would use more, you know, analog triggers. The buttons feel pretty good. I like how clicky they are. So yeah, the thumbsticks feel okay. Like I said, they just are a little small for my liking, and they do have drift, like I said. But everything feels, you know, good. It just feels proper, you know. So I'd give them like an A tier. They aren't exactly the best thing ever, but they're pretty impressive for what they are. So A tier is pretty good for me. All right, let's switch things up and talk about the Xbox for a bit, because this design, Microsoft has really just used this for like years and years at this point. Like, they figured out, you know, the whole formula to make a controller, because every single controller pretty much around here, except for pretty much the Wii U controller and the Quest 2 controllers, has modeled like their kind of like, I don't know, their grips, like after this thing, you know? Like, you can say that these all have, you know, the similar, you know, look to them, you know, when you grip it. This is a pretty good controller in my opinion. I wouldn't really rank it, you know, above the Joy-Cons or just right beside the Joy-Cons, because I'd say I prefer the HD rumble and like how just the rumble feels on the Joy-Cons opposed to, you know, how it feels on the Xbox controller. There's nothing wrong with how it feels on this controller. It just feels like the standard one, you know? And aside from that, everything just feels like, you know, a standard controller. I do prefer how the buttons, like the A, B, X, and Y buttons feel on the Joy-Cons, because they are more clicky, and I like how, you know, those feel on that. And also, this controller is just really noisy. Like playing at night with this thing, you don't want people to, you know, wake up, so you just kind of play quiet, but you don't really get the best results in playing the game of playing quiet. So you gotta, you know, try harder. And when trying harder, this thing just gets pretty loud, like really loud. You know, this is a pretty noisy controller. So that's one of my few gripes with it. You know, I always loved this controller like ever since I was like a kid. It's holding up pretty well. So I'd say it has some good build quality. You know, even though we have kind of roughed it up a bit. Like we don't even have the soft covering for this thumbstick anymore. And this trigger, it just kind of makes a little noise when you press it down, like opposed to this trigger. You know, so that's somewhere right there. But overall, this thing works pretty well for stuff like racing games, shooting games, you know, stuff like that. This controller is like bread and butter. Like this layout right here is exactly what you want to have for a game like Forza. I love how the triggers kind of have this kind of like sloping up thing so that they don't slip off your hand when you're trying to, you know, press them down, you know. When you press them down, they feel like, you know, you're pressing down like, I don't know, like, you know, proper. They just feel proper. Oh wait, and I forgot to mention, still uses AA batteries, man. Which I will say, among the big three, Microsoft is the only one to actually, you know, give you the option of batteries or a play and charge kit. With stuff like the PS5 controller, that thing has been known to have just really bad battery life. And it has a lithium-ion battery inside, so you can't exactly replace it that easily, you know? But with this, you could either buy a play and charge kit or just swap in little AA batteries, which are pretty wasteful. I do just wish that they gave you the play and charge kit, you know, with the Xbox and the controller themselves, instead of just giving you AA batteries. But I do like how Microsoft is giving you the option, you know, of saying, oh, rechargeable or just AA batteries. So that's pretty neat. What else do I gotta say about this controller? Yeah, me ranking this controller is essentially me just ranking the Xbox One to the Xbox Series X and S controllers. These can go in both of the Joy-Cons. I wouldn't say that they're the greatest thing ever. You know, this is what a lot of controllers have modeled themselves after, but still, it still has some gripes, like using AA batteries, you know, instead of just giving you the plain charge kit, and you know, the D-pad also. I don't like the D-pad on this thing. It feels okay, but just using it, you know, which not many Xbox games do, but just using it just doesn't feel okay. In my opinion, I vastly prefer just having, you know, the split buttons like these ones right here. You know? So, I put these below the Joy-Cons. Alright, let's talk about these guys. The Meta Quest controllers. These are surprisingly durable. Like, from Meta, which is a company who doesn't really make any hardware, you know? Like, back in 2020, you know, Meta didn't really make a lot of hardware. Like, nowadays, they make the smart glasses and the Ray-Ban glasses and stuff like that. But, you know, for being like one of Meta's first, like, you know, hardware attempts, these are pretty sturdy. I'm gonna rank these at the same level as the Joy-Cons, you know, maybe even a little higher, because they don't have drift like Joy-Cons, you know, but they feel pretty good. Everything just feels pretty substantial, you know. They do have, you know, what's it called? All your standard buttons, you know, right here. They do have just kind of home keys right here. It does feel really solid to hold in the hand when playing VR games, especially like a game like, you know, Beat Saber. And the tracking just worked pretty well on these controllers. I will say, just like with the Xbox controller, I wish that they gave you, you know, just a rechargeable pack. I will say, just like with the Xbox controller, I wish that they gave you a rechargeable pack with these things instead of AA batteries, you know, because I think it's way better to just have a lithium-ion battery and just use that until that degrades, than just having multiple, you know, AA batteries and just using them until they die. Which, you can recycle both, but I just prefer to use the lithium-ion one because it's just less of a hassle whenever they die. But yeah, like I said, these are pretty durable. These things have like battle scars somewhere that I can't really find. That, you know, from me playing games like Gorilla Tag and Beat Saber, and I didn't really set up the playroom too well, so I kind of hit the wall with those, but that's like in the past, you know, that's in the past. Yeah, everything's pretty substantial with these things. The rumble feels okay. It doesn't feel, it's probably, it's nowhere near as bad as the bin box, but I'd say it's probably the worst out of like the PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo, you know, controllers. But aside from that, these are pretty good, you know. I'd rank them about the same level as the Joy-Cons because the Joy-Cons do have Joy-Con drift, but again, the rumble and I think the buttons feel better on the Joy-Cons. You know, so these are going in the same place as those. These are pretty good. Good job, Meta. Going back to Nintendo, let's talk about this, or more so not going back to Nintendo, but let's talk about this thing. This was my first third-party Switch Pro controller right here. It's the 8BitDo SN30 Pro Plus. Did you get all of that? It does have a bit of a clunky name because basically 8BitDo essentially just iterated off of previous controllers. Like, they used to have a controller called the SN30, which was a controller that did not have these grips and did not have these sticks. It was essentially just this kind of just circle area without the sticks, you know? And then they updated that to the SN30 Pro, which you still didn't get the stick. I mean, you still didn't get the grips, but you had the sticks. So you still kind of had to hold it like this, you know, when you were playing. Like, just imagine this controller didn't have any grips, you know? You had to hold it like this, kind of like an SNES controller, you know? So, yeah. It all led up to the SN30 Pro Plus. And I will say, this controller, I might give it like an S tier, man. I love this thing, genuinely. If it wasn't for me stupidly breaking it and me stupidly throwing away the little Ultimate software key, I would keep using this controller to this day. I just love it so much. Like, I love how the buttons feel. Everything just feels so sturdy. The D-pad, it's the best feeling thing out of this entire you know, list right here. That's even above stuff like the Wii U Pro controller right here, which the D-pad feels great here too. I just like how this one is a little more tactile. Like, everything here just feels so substantial, you know? It does have what's it called? Analog triggers instead of the digital ones of the Joy-Cons, which, you know, doesn't really matter too much because the Switch, you know, not a lot of games on it use analog triggers. But I think like Fortnite and like, I don't know, Rocket League do use it, so that's a plus for just those games. But for stuff like Smash Bros, you will have to, you know, press down on this thing a little faster than something like this. Because with this, it's just a button, alright? It's either you're on or you're off. So that's kind of handy for stuff like Smash Bros, you know? But with this, it'll take a bit longer to activate something like, I don't know, your shield. I could have solved this if I had this stupid Ultimate software key, but as a 12-year-old, nothing makes sense, does it? And if you're curious, the Ultimate software key I keep talking about, it essentially just allowed you to just customize almost everything about this controller. Like, you could map all the buttons to whatever you wanted. I forgot what else you could do, but you could turn it into like a PC controller if you wanted to. You could turn it into like, I don't know, a macOS controller, an Android controller. You could do that with the Ultimate software, and you could, like, I don't know, I forgot what else you could do. The only thing I remember is that you could map all the buttons to whatever you wanted, but it could do so much more. Just holding something like this compared to something like the dirty, disgusting bin box over there is a night and day difference. This feels like a tank that I could use for like 10 years and still have it working just fine, you know? The only thing that happened to these is that my little brother did get water in the controller a little bit, so it only works when like wired. What it also got right was the whole battery situation right here, because I don't really have the rechargeable battery, but it came with this controller, right? I remember it coming with this controller. I don't have it anymore because it stopped working for some reason, but it came with this controller. It worked until, you know, some water damage got in the controller, but that's, I can't do too much about that right now. But yeah, you could either use AA batteries with this thing, or you could use the included, you know, battery pack. I do wish that 8BitDo sold the battery pack back when this was like, you know, their main, you know, pro controller, so that you could just buy them and just have like extras laying around. But they didn't do that, so that kind of sucks. But still, the fact that they gave you the, you know, battery pack with this controller instead of giving you AA batteries at first, you know, is like, it's just my favorite way of doing, like, you know, batteries on controllers that are wireless, you know. It's like, yeah, you could have stuff like the Switch Joy-Cons, which, you know, do have batteries in them, but once these batteries do degrade, you know, because I'd say smaller batteries are more prone to, you know, degrading and dying faster than bigger batteries. So once these do degrade, you know, it will be harder to swap the batteries on these Joy-Cons. You can just pop it out and you could just either use double A's, you know, or you can just buy a new battery that 8-Bit Dude should have sold, in my opinion. I will say, I remember the battery being really snug in here and me having to like really like work to get it out, you know? I would have to like really like push this thing to get it out, you know? But this controller right here, this is probably my favorite controller like of the entire list right here. Like I just love how this thing feels, you know? I can still use it wired. It's not totally broken. Sure, I'd say that, you know, the Xbox style of how, you know, the sticks are placed, this kind of like diagonal style, is better in my opinion, but I don't like, it's not that much of a difference in my opinion, you know? It still works really well, and just the build and this, just the feel of how this controller just feels, it's just amazing. But yeah, summary, this controller, really good quality, feels great in the hand, everything I just love about this thing. So I'm just gonna put it in S tier. Superb. Good job, 8-Bit Dude. Moving on, let's talk about these PowerA controllers now, shall we? So these two are called the PowerA Enhanced Wireless Controller for the Nintendo Switch. Now this one's rechargeable via USB-C, and this one does use AA batteries, you know, so that's kind of stark contrast. You know, they did give you the option for this one, but I still kind of wish that they did the 8-Bit Dude thing and just gave you just one, you know, spec. You know, either you can have the batteries or you can take the battery out and just, you know, give you AA's. These back in like 2018, 2019, 2020 were like the gold standard, you know, the de facto option for anyone in like, I don't know, Walmart, Target, Best Buy, who is like, oh, okay, I want a Pro Controller for my Switch, but I don't want to spend $70 for the actual official one, which, yeah, that's the reason why I bought all these third-party ones instead of, you know, the official one. I just kind of felt bad asking my parents to pay $70 for the controller, so I thought these $50 ones would be good. But yeah, this feels alright in the hand, you know. I'd say everything about this thing just feels kind of just, you know, standard. Nothing really too special, or, you know, nothing really like game-changing. I'd just say it all works. It is lacking rumble and NFC, but it does have some gyro controls which you can use, which they do work pretty well. And it also does charge via USB-C, like I said before. So not much to say about this thing. I do wish that I got another 8-Bit Dude controller, because I got this before this controller had water damage on it. So yeah, I wish I got another one, but I can't complain because this works pretty well. I've been using this for about a couple of years and it works pretty well too. I will say, Nintendo really needs to start doing more, you know, special edition, well, not special edition, but just kind of custom theme controllers, because look at this Kirby thing. I think this thing looks really good, you know? I got this I got this back in 2025 and I think this looks pretty good, you know? It's a nice themed Kirby controller. Yes, you do still use AA batteries, but, you know, it still looks pretty good in my opinion. I wish that Nintendo would just really do official, you know, stuff like this, instead of just, you know, only doing the standard black. I know they've done the Splatoon controller and the Smash Ultimate controller and like, I don't know, the Xenoblade 2 controller, which they look alright, but I wish they kind of did, you know, full body stuff like this, because with those, they only really changed the grips and a little bit of the front of the controller. So yeah, I'm gonna put these in B tier, or just in this tier with the Xbox One controller. You know, they aren't exactly the best things, but I'd say they're just kind of the de facto standard controller for the Switch. Not standard controller, but like, you know, just, you know, they just aren't the best, but they aren't the worst. They're just mediocre, alright, in my opinion. And now, that leaves us with you. Let's talk about you, buddy. Ah yes, the Wii U gamepad. The thing that I have countless hours and memories with, and the thing that I still need a battery for. Listen, I may not have played the Wii U in a long time, but I still have enough memories as a kid to where, you know, I can still talk about my thoughts on this thing. And overall, my thoughts are pretty good. A lot of people hate on this thing because, oh, it's the Wii U gamepad, the Wii U is a failure and stuff. But I'm gonna say, this controller feels really well in the hand, you know? I like how the thumbsticks feel. The D-pad feels pretty good, although not as good as my GOAT over there. Everything just feels like quality in you know, Nintendo, because I have dropped this thing a couple of times, but you know, I have dropped this thing a couple times back in the day, but nothing's ever happened to it. The stylus, in traditional, Nintendo fashion, I have lost that as a kid, it will never be found again. I have no idea where it is. Only thing bad about the controller is the battery life and the screen. The screen, like, as a kid, I've never really had any problems with it, but I've seen videos nowadays, and this screen looks pretty crunchy, and I'm kind of shocked that I didn't really notice it as a kid back in the day, because it's pretty crunchy, especially when playing games like Smash Bros. And Mario Kart 8. I would play tons of 8-player Smash on this thing, on the gamepad itself, and I just wasn't paying attention, I guess. But yeah, everything's just in a place where, it feels pretty good, I think they made a good move moving this thumbstick to the top, along with this thumbstick right here, because if they moved it to the bottom, like the Xbox method right here, I feel like it wouldn't be as, as comfortable to have the thumbstick right here, the button on the top. But yeah, everything just works really well in this thing. One drawback, again, is the battery life. The battery life is terrible. When I had the battery on this thing, it would last, like, at max, like, a couple of hours. I'd say, like, 5 hours. And that's only because this thing has so much junk on it, Like, it has a whole camera that, was used in the Wii generation, but now, like, if you get a Wii U nowadays, you just can't use this camera, It's just useless to you. Like, aside from taking pictures in the Mii Maker to, like, I don't know, make your Miis, that's the only use for the camera, like, from what I've seen, nowadays. But back in the day, you could, like, literally video call with this camera on the Wii U, which, that sounds egregious. I don't know, man. One thing I am remembering is that this controller needed a whole separate power adapter. Like it needed a whole separate spot in, like, your power, like, strip to be plugged into alongside the Wii U console itself, because apparently this controller takes so much power that it needs its own power strip to be charged and stuff like that, which I think is just kind of insane. I think Nintendo could have probably worked it out so this thing did not need its whole separate spot in an outlet, to charge with. But I love this thing. This thing has given me so many memories. This specifically is the Zelda Wind Waker Wii U gamepad. You can see it does have the Zelda insignia and stuff on it. Just hoping this thing takes me back, dude. Oh my god. I might put this in the same category as, like, the Quest 2 and the Joy-Con. It does have its noticeable gripes, but at its core, it's a really good controller. So I'm gonna put it there. And that's pretty much my entire ranking of every controller that I have. Now, I do have more stuff like the N64 controller, but I can't say much about this because I haven't played the N64 yet. Like, yeah, I know this 3-prong design is really controversial and it just feels really weird, but I can't say much about it because I haven't played the games on it yet, I can say, oh, it feels weird all I want, but until I play a game with it, I can't say much about it, I say the buttons feel pretty Nintendo-like, and, like, everything feels pretty, standard Nintendo-like. I wonder what these 2 buttons were used for. This stick feels pretty bad, in my opinion. It feels the worst. It might feel even worse than the bin box, honestly. No, it's not worse than the bin box. The bin box are just unredeemable. I could also rank Wii remotes, which, if you want my blind ranking after like 10 years of not using them, I give them, let's say, around here. Because yeah, they are pretty good controllers, but that's just my blind ranking after not using them after, for 10 years, so don't take that, too seriously. But we started with just utter bullcrap nonsense, with the bin box over there on the other side of the bed, in just plain old F tier. Only thing in the F tier. And then we went to a controller that just has, a really serious problem with the Joy-Cons, because aside from that, these still work pretty well. Like, if I charge them and use them today without the joysticks, they still would work pretty well. It's just that the Joy-Con drift is just really bad on these things. So they go in there for my, personal ranking. These are just kind of my list for, like, oh, the de facto controller that just doesn't really do too much right, but it doesn't do too much wrong, which is kind of there. Which, yeah, I probably could rank this a little higher because, like, this thing, it's pretty good and it has, lasted us a long time. It just works really well. But I'd still put it below stuff like the Quest 2 controller, the Wii U gamepad, in my opinion. even though this thing has a way bigger battery life than the Wii U gamepad will ever. But yeah, I'm gonna stand firm on putting this right next to, not right next to these, but just above these two, you know. And going into this tier right here, this is just kind of pretty good controllers that, you know, in my opinion, have some gripes that keep them from being just perfect. You know, like Joy-Cons, they're pretty good. You know, I like how the buttons feel. I could say that these controllers could be a bit bigger because, no, my hands are a bit small, and, you know, I have seen people say that, oh, this controller could be a bit bigger. It's way too small for my hands. But for me, it works fine. These work pretty well, like I said, these work pretty well. They just put some, you know, normal gripes like the battery life, and, you know, these just don't really have anything that's amazing on them. They just work pretty well. And this, my favorite controller out of this entire list, just S tier, it works really well. I'm gonna have a baby with this thing, bro. I'm gonna have a baby with this thing.